So our moderator today, as I mentioned, is our dearest Florencia Gonzalez, and she is the co-director of the Inclusion and Diverse Populations Core here at GATS. She specializes on leading efforts to establish community academic partnerships for inclusion of underrepresented groups in health research. She has prior experience managing clinical trials and overseeing disparity health research within community settings. Additionally, she has a history of grassroots field experience conducting case management with immigrant populations and managing public health projects in cross-cultural settings such as Sub-Saharan Africa and Honduras. So Florencia will take it from here.
Okay, if you can please skip a slide and let me know if you're having a hard time hearing me.
We can hear you okay, Florencia.
Okay, next slide, please.
Not this one?
Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, good evening. So my presentation is going to be short and sweet. I want to make sure we give enough time to Dr. Griffith for his wonderful presentation and Q&A. So before I go into my presentation about the importance of diverse representation in clinical research, I would like to take a few moments to provide a brief description of clinical trials. Clinical trials test new ways to understand, diagnose, prevent, and treat diseases. There are different terms used for clinical trials, such as studies or health research, which I may be using interchangeably throughout my presentation. So since COVID-19 has emerged, there has been a worldwide focus on clinical trials to better prevent, diagnose, and treat COVID-19. This coverage has also brought greater attention to the need of diverse representation in clinical trials by racially and ethnic diverse groups, particularly because of these groups were the most affected by COVID. Next slide, please. And as many of us know, historically, Blacks, Hispanics, and other ethnic or racial groups have been not well represented in clinical trials. This chart, for instance, shows the disproportion of Black and Hispanic participation in studies. As you can see, Blacks represent 12% of the US population, but only 5% participate in clinical trials. Similarly, Hispanics comprise 16% of the population, but only 1% of Hispanics participate in clinical trials. Clearly, there is a need for greater participation by these groups and other groups who have not been well represented, despite a slightly better effort by study funders and by researchers to focus on making efforts to increase diversity. We are seeing somewhat of an improvement, but we still have a long way to go. Next slide, please. And there are multiple reasons for the lack of participation by diverse groups. There are past unethical practices that have led to mistrust in health research. You may have heard of Tuskegee, the unethical practices that took place with this particular trial, or the Henrietta Lacks trials of her cells being used without her or her family's permission. So certainly these are very good reasons for the mistrust in health research, though we have also come a long way in implementing policies and practices to safeguard participants. Lack of transportation participants can play a role too in lack of participation. Low socioeconomic status can also have an impact. Lack of awareness about clinical trials by diverse groups. Doctors may not communicate to their patients about clinical trials that are going on. And also lack of investment in time and resources by the study team to recruit diverse groups, including people with limited English proficiency. And this is something that our team, GUTS, is really trying to make an effort to help investigators with strategies for inclusion so that they are able to put the necessary resources to ensure that diverse groups are welcomed into research. There's also researcher bias. Researchers, for example, can assume people of color may not want to be involved in research, so they're not asked. So these are some examples of why there may be lack of diverse representation. Next slide, please. However, as we mentioned before, it is very important that ethnically, racially, and culturally diverse groups, as well as other groups who have been historically underrepresented in health research, such as those with disability, be included in clinical trials. Including diverse groups of individuals in research provides confidence that research results will apply to a wider range of people. Genetics can sometimes also play a role in how a person responds to a medicine. So having that diversity in the trial is critical. Factors like a person's age may also have an impact on the side effects experience. Specific groups of people may have higher incidence of certain diseases like cancer, hypertension, or diabetes. One of our Howard University infectious disease clinicians and COVID-19 vaccine researcher stated the following. Her name is Dr. Siha Majid, and she's doing studies with a concerted effort to include diverse groups. And she says very beautifully, as quoted in this slide, give me a second, I'll pull it up. She says, Black and Latino communities have an unequal burden of chronic health conditions like cancer, heart disease, and hypertension, oftentimes with more than one of these health problems. If vaccine trials includes Black and Latinos with these diverse medical histories, we can have greater confidence that vaccines will be safe for people with a wide range of health conditions. And I really do think that Dr. Majid is getting at the heart of the importance of why we need diverse representation, not only for COVID trials, but also for other trials of varying diseases. So how can you get involved? Next slide, please. Okay. I have to pull my slides back up. I'm working on a very small computer today. So you can ask your healthcare provider about different treatment plans when confronted with a given disease, and how you can become involved in an ongoing clinical trial if they're available. You can consider joining a community advisory board or a patient advisory board, especially if you're interested in rare diseases that usually have groups, advocacy groups for that particular disease. We can also, if you don't have readily available access to a community advisory board that can influence research, or a patient advisory board, we can certainly provide you more information, and we will be providing more information towards the end, but you can also always reach out to us and we can guide you through that process. You can also educate yourself. We have a wonderful resource. It's called Let's Talk About Clinical Research that we've developed that provides terminology, clinical research terminology. It provides just a variety of information to better inform you so you can make an informed decision if choosing to participate in a clinical trial. And I would say the most important thing to walk away with is the fact that participating in a clinical trial is voluntary. You can, it's a position where you volunteer, and you can always leave a trial at any point in the trial. No one should ever make you feel like you or coerce you into participating in a trial. So we'll be happy to share more resources. We'll be placing the links in the chat. And that's it for my presentation.